Hello everybody, this is Skyflight44, aka Zect44, and today I'm going to be talking about some Lord of the Rings LCG cards, specifically from the core set and our tactics cards. Now, leadership, we've already gone through. They're mainly for resource generation, being able to do a lot of things, a lot of support things as well. But tactics is focused on combat, very much focused on combat. And just looking at it, it can't quest at all. Especially in the very beginning of the game, tactics is a terrible sphere for questing. Because if you're running a mono tactics deck, you literally have 2 willpower on Gimli, 1 willpower on Legolas, 1 willpower on Thalon, and 1 on Beorn, and that is it. Nothing to increase it. And the allies do not have any willpower whatsoever. But let's go through and see whether or not these cards are actually useful. With the standout hero in the entire game, or at least the core set anyway, useful for basically the entire campaign. Tactics Gimli. For a cost of 11, he is a 2/2/2/5. He can do whatever you need him to. One of the few characters that can actually quest in tactics, can attack, can defend as well. But he gains 1 attack for each damage token on him. And there's ways of getting more HP on him. So Gimli's attack power can go through the roof, and I've seen Gimli slay an entire troll on his own. Also, he's a dwarf, and we all know how powerful dwarves are going to be. If not, I can tell you dwarves are going to be the most powerful trait in the early game. Legolas, on the other hand, for a cost of 9, a much lower cost, a 1/3/1/4. He can quest, but that's basically just because you might need him to if you're running a solo game. But outside of that, his 3 attack power is really good. His 1 defense is alright, but you're never going to defend with him anyway, unless you're running one specific scenario I can think of, which only allows you to defend with ranged characters. His attack power and his ranged ability, though, makes him a fantastic hero. His response, on the other hand, is also really nice. After Legolas participates in an attack that destroys an enemy, place 2 progress tokens on the current quest. This also means you can go through and plan accordingly with traveling to locations, so you can almost entirely beat those locations very early on, just making Legolas kill something. Fallon, on the other hand, is the only quester you're ever going to go about using in a tactics, in the tactics sphere early on. Fallon is a 1/2/2/4, not really made to quest. However, when you look at his ability, that's when everything really cuts in. While Fallon is committed to a quest, deal 1 damage to each enemy as it is revealed by the encounter deck. This does not count for defense. You just place 1 damage on them. There are specific enemies that have 1 HP. One specific one comes to mind in the early game that Fallon being able to do 1 damage to them definitely just kills them on the spot, and they can't do what they're known to be, effective at doing. So Fallon in a 4-player game is a very, very good option, because you're going to see a lot of enemies come off the encounter deck, and he will deal 1 damage to each of them. Which, even 1 damage on a lot of different enemies can be the difference between being able to kill them in a single, within that turn, or having them stick around for another turn, being a nuisance next turn. Overall, the heroes here are also pretty good, but then again, there really isn't a bad hero in the core set. We won't get to mediocre heroes until later. Well, let's look at some allies. The allies, unlike the leadership allies, are all fantastic. Gondorian Spearman. At a cost of 2 is a 0-1-1-1. He can defend against other players because he has Sentinel. Because he has the Gondor trait, he also gains another defense for Gondor, which can actually allow him to defend better off. But in reality, his wonderful thing is his ability to be a blocker for somebody else, not just yourself, and the fact that he deals 1 damage to an attacking enemy when he is declared as a defender. That is before he's going to actually have an attack made on him, or at least the damage dealt to him. So if he can kill an enemy with that 1 damage, he will go through and kill the enemy before he's ever damaged. This can mean, along with Thalin, anything with 2 hit points, the Gondorian Spearman can just knock out without ever having a problem. Or if you go through and have something that has 1 HP left, even if it's a troll, the Gondorian Spearman can take it out. And the Veteran Axe Hand is one of the really good ally in this. It costs a 2, a 0-2-1-2 is fantastic. I still say that the Erebor Hammersmith is just overall better. And this is just a better stat distribution than the Guard of the Citadel. But again, if the Guard of the Citadel just had 1 more point, then I'm pretty sure the Guard of the Citadel would also be a wonderful ally. Especially if it had 1 point in defense, because then it could be a 2-2 for a 2 defense, 2 hit points, which would be much better. But the Veteran Axe Hand is a dwarf, which means this is a prime card to be using when you get Dane and all of the loads of dwarf support. Even throwing a Veteran Axe Hand into anything that runs tactics in the beginning of the game is just the best option you can have. On the other hand, we have Horseback Archer. This one has a similar stat line to Silverlord Archer, except it's a 0-2-1-2, which does allow him to defend. And by that I mean allows him not to die from one of those terrible treacheries, which means his range is actually going to be quite a bit better. He is also Rohan, but Rohan is going to be more useful for questing allies and characters that can also attack than ones that can't quest whatsoever. Then we have our only unique ally for tactics, Beorn. His stat line is pretty decent. Not gonna lie, even for a cost of 6, a 1-3-3-6 is fantastic. The ability to attack, defend, and defend several times is unbelievable. Especially when you look at his action, and it states, gains 5 attack until the end of the phase. At that point in time, Ever Vigilant has never found a better target. At the end of the phase in which you trigger this effect, shuffle Beorn back into your deck. Limit once per round. That sounds so good. So freaking good. Even sometimes you just, in order to kill off a troll, kill off something really big, you're gonna have to use Beorn in his attack. And his just 5 extra attack as well. But then again, there isn't technically a single better option for defending than Baorn is, just because his 3 defense and 6 hit points allow him to soak up 8, 8 attack power from full HP, which nothing else can survive. Citadel Plate, on the other hand, can make others survive. Attached hero gets 4 hit points for a cost of 4. That seems like a lot, except that can make Gimli even more powerful, because he can gain more hit points, thus he can gain more damage, which means he gains more attack. Or Glowin, which is going to make Glowin gain more hit points, which means Glowin gains more potential for resources. And those resources can be turned into quite a bit. With Citadel Plate and taking a hit from a troll, you can go about using Grim Resolve, which means you can do so much better with Citadel Plate. Dwarven Axe is the only real thing that it gives an unconditional 1 attack power to an attached hero. However, if you attach it to a dwarf, it instead is 2 attack power. This can be thrown into Glowin, this can be thrown into Gimli, or this can be thrown to Thalin for a lovely attack power fix, or this can be thrown onto Dun here in order to give him increased attack power so that his abilities can go off and be more useful. Dwarven Axe is something that we're going to be using now more than later, because like the Dwarf Axe is just a better attachment. But again, we only have a set amount of cards. We can lose cards in a campaign. The Dwarven Axe still has its place. Horn of Gondor, though, is the single most polarizing one I can think of, in which this is really good in a regular game, not very good in the campaign. So it's unique, attached to a hero, restricted, after a character is killed, add 1 resource to attached hero's pool. Initially, it was after a character leaves play. I'm pretty sure this got errated after the Sylvan trait basically gained a lot of cards going back to hand shenanigans. But that may have been... I can't necessarily say that. But Horn of Gondor, we will be using as it is errated. So after a character is killed, add 1 resource to attached hero's pool. This means we have to have some character die and killed in order to gain resources. This isn't something I want to go about doing. This isn't something I'm going to be planning for. But in a regular game, you can turn a Snowborn Scout into 1 progress, 1 defense, and you get your resource back turned into a tactics resource, which you can probably use to feint something else. Pretty decent, to be honest. But at the same time, not very useful in the campaign. Blade of Gondolin, though, does have its place. Attached to a hero, restricted, attached hero gets +1 attack, 1 attack, and an orc. After attached hero attacks and destroys an enemy, place 1 progress token on the current quest. Orc, as you can probably understand and guess, it has a lot of uses. Orcs are everywhere. You really don't go without possibly facing at least 1 orc in an actual game. On the other hand, if you're fighting a lot of spiders, Blade of Gondolin loses some of its use. But it still has its response. After attached hero attacks and destroys an enemy, place 1 progress token on the current quest. Having 3 of these and throwing them on to several heroes can, when you're fighting a lot, add a lot of progress onto the quest. So again, you can go about planning for that. If you go about throwing 2 of these onto Legolas, he can even put 4 progress on the quest for killing 1 thing. So for allies are just good. For the attachments are fairly good. The events, on the other hand, are a bit more of a mixed bag. Stand together. For a cost of 0, choose a player. That player may declare any number of his eligible characters as defenders against each enemy attacking him this phase. What this means is you can... Normally, you can only defend an attack with 1 character. You can attack with multiple, but you can only defend with 1. Stand together allows the player to use multiple characters as defenders against an enemy. It has its place, but this isn't entirely what I would say is useful. It also doesn't explain how damage is dealt. I'm pretty sure damage is dealt however you wish, which is probably the best thing about it, because you would have to go about placing damage onto any different or amongst the defenders. Rain of Arrows. For cost of 1, exhaust a character you control with the range keyword to choose a player. Deal 1 damage to each enemy engaged with that player. Utilizing something like Gondorian Spearman, utilizing Swift Strike, utilizing Fallon already to deal damage, Rain of Arrows can very well just kill off a bunch of enemies. The thing is, it's a blanket damage is not going to be more useful than just the horseback archer or Legolas attacking a single enemy usually. Because the majority of the time you don't have enough damage on enemies in order to make Rain of Arrows kill off several enemies. Which usually makes it just attacking with the range character a better option. Quick Strike. Quick Strike is situational. It's either really good or useless. Quick Strike's a cost of 1. Exhaust the character you control to immediately declare it as an attacker and resolve its attack against any eligible enemy target. The big thing about this is it allows you to attack an enemy before it can attack you, killing it off. The problem with that is you can only exhaust a single character you control to immediately declare as an attacker, not multiple. And therefore, you're going into this attack far weaker than what you would have with attacking with multiple characters, which usually makes it so that killing off an enemy is much harder to do. Gimli, though, makes this much stronger card. On the other hand, going through and using this with Done Here, who can attack into the staging area, Quick Strike is a lot better. But if you can't guarantee a kill, Quick Strike is a waste of a resource. Feint, on the other hand, is along the best cards in the core set, in my opinion. The top 5 cards in the core set would be Faramir, Sneak Attack, Feint, A Test of Will, and, in my opinion, Secret Paths. Those, to me, are the 5 cards I feel are the strongest and most useful. Feint allows you to, for a cost of 1, choose an enemy engaged with the player. That enemy cannot attack the player this phase, but it's a combat action, which means it has to be played in the combat phase. Therefore, when an enemy is attacking you outside of it, you cannot feint it. But this will save. This will save heroes so much. A troll's coming along, that is the feint target. Attercop's coming along. That is 100% the feint target. You do not take those attacks. Those attacks kill. Blade Mastery. For cost of 1, choose a character. Until the end of the phase, that character gains 1 attack and 1 defense. For a cost of 1, this isn't good. The only thing that makes this really wonderful is the fact that, number 1, this allows you, instead of placing an attachment on a character in which the attachment is stuck to that character, Blade Mastery allows you to go about increasing the attack power of any character in order to make a kill happen. The other thing about Blade Mastery is the fact that it can give you 1 defense, which makes it so useful. Because gaining defense is not something that happens very often, and gaining defense in a split second isn't something you're going to see very often. There's like Kazad later on can give 3 attack power for a dwarf. Much better than this, and that's at a cost of 0. But finding defense isn't something you're going to be able to find very often, so it does have its place. Thicket of Spears. You must use resources from 3 different heroes' pools to pay for this card. Choose a player. That player is engaged and enemies cannot attack that player this phase. There is a problem with this in the core set. This card in the core set is useless because unless you're playing with a 4-player game and you're playing a tactics-only deck, that's the only way you can go about using the card. If you're playing a modern game with the entire pool, this is a much better card. Again, making it so that any enemies engaged with a player cannot attack them is a fantastic card, especially with a cost of 3. Also, the fact that it has, as it's an action, non-combat action, it can save somebody while in the questing phase or any other phase. Definitely gives it some utility over feint. Otherwise, I don't really think too highly of this card. Mainly because it's the entire you must use resources from 3 different heroes' pools to pay for it. It kind of kills the card for me. Otherwise, it'll be fantastic. Swift Strike, on the other hand, is a cost of 2. Response up to characters declared as a defender. Deal 2 damage to the attacking enemy. This means anything that has, especially with Thalon around, anything that has 3 HP that comes off of the encounter deck can easily be felled by just questing with Thalon and using Swift Strike. Not to mention, like the Gondorian Spearman, dealing damage to an enemy straight up deals damage. You don't have to worry about defense. So if something has a high defense, Swift Strike, it does not give a damn. So overall, Tactics kind of fares fairly well. With pretty good heroes, with wonderful allies, and a unique ally that's actually worth his ridiculous cost. There is something to be, applauded by that. The attachments, depending on how you're playing, are more or less useful or less useful, especially as the game progresses. And some of the events, like Stand Together, Rain of Arrows, Blade Mastery, Thicket of Spears, and even sometimes Quick Strike, are less useful as both time goes on, and even in the current in the core set. But Swift Strike's very useful, and Feint is invaluable. With that being said, have a nice day, everybody. Next time, I'm going to be talking about spirit cards.